afternoon. Hello, everybody. How are we all today? First day at Tales, no broken bones, no missing teeth. Looking good, everybody in the room? Great. My name is Claire Smith-Warner, and I will be co-presenting the Anthropology of the Modern Bar for you today. Just a quick reminder of the to download the Tales app and the hashtags and all of the information that you need to do your social commentary is at the bottom of our screen. The Wi-Fi code, for those of you who've downloaded, it is Red Bull gives you wings, I think. So just in case you need to know that information. So as I said, I'm Claire Smith-Warner. I'm Head of Spirit Creation and Mixology for Belvedere Vodka. And I'm joined in this seminar with Tristan Stephenson, who I'm sure you all know is the curious bartender, author, and owner of many beautiful bars, and Jeffrey Kluger. And it's wonderful that Jeff's here today because he should really be in New York talking about Pluto and the flyby, because Jeff is the editor-at-large of Time magazine, specialising in science, and is the author of 9 books, including Apollo 13. So it's a kind of a big deal for us to have him here. So thank you both for joining us. So thank you, yes. Also want to thank our sponsors, which of course are Belvedere, and I want to give a big thanks, because I always forget to do this, but a big thanks ahead of the seminar to our wonderful caps who will be providing the cocktails for us today. So let's get started. I have a note here that says take a deep breath. So this is a big subject. And actually, when Jeff first suggested this subject to me, I was a bit skeptical, because I was thinking, what could anthropology possibly have to do with how we interact in bars, why we go into bars, even the role of the bar. What could that have to do with the bar? I mean, so for me, I wanted to obviously find out what anthropology was. It's obviously not a place to shop, an inspiring place to shop for women's clothing, accessories, and home decor, but instead a place as the study of what makes us human. So it's a pretty small subject. Anthropologists, of course, take a broad approach to understanding the many different aspects of the human experience, and provides a sort of window to our past, a mirror for our present, and a lens through which we look to the future. Anthropologists research, observe, analyse, and apply what they learn towards an understanding of the many variations of the human condition. And a grounding in human adaptations, both biological and cultural, contributes to our understanding of adaptations today. So while the bar might be a place to flirt, to drink, to socialize, it's also one of the best real-time anthropology experiments of all time. Understanding how the social system of the bar operates offers more than just an intriguing peek into our human condition. And it provides insights into how to run a better bar, to facilitate the interrelationships, which is one of the biggest reasons why bars exist at all the while keeping conflicts and foul-ups and breakdowns to a minimum. And perhaps because drinking has always played such a role in identity, its uses and meanings show no signs of abating. Just look at where we all are today. Biggest cocktail festival in the world. But unfortunately, we don't today have time to look at what drinking means in Poland, or what drinking sake means to the Japanese, or even wine to the French, because what I discovered in looking at this subject is that it's huge and complex and fascinating. So in order to answer these questions and many more, we need a few more weeks, months, or years. And in fact, many of the questions around the reasons why people consume alcohol and what drinking means to those people, or even what drinking or not drinking means to people, are still to be answered, because much of the research on this topic is skewed towards the negatives, the abuse, addiction, and the violence, rather than looking at the reasons for its enduring popularity. Thank you, Tess. So, acknowledging the breadth and the depth and the sheer scale of this topic, we needed to narrow it down a little. So our seminar will look at the human experience of today's modern bar, focusing on 4 main areas. We're going to look at the role of the modern bar in people's lives today versus in the past. how that environment has changed, and what has remained constant, what we've lost and what we've gained. Ways to improve your business beyond what you're currently doing by identifying why today's customer chooses your bar. And case studies of other businesses that have used similar techniques, identifying some key techniques that we hope are enlightening and, of course, useful. So we're going to peer outwards from the position of behind the bar to understand what people are looking for when they come into the bar. Because do we, in fact, all just want to go where everybody knows our name?
World today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. See, our troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name. You wanna go where people know people are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Tristan. I'm going to kind of take charge of the drinks element of this presentation and leave all the real geekery to the experts here. Although I will be presumptuous enough to add a few of my comments in at times, but feel free to just knock them down, set them on fire. The drinks we're serving are, I guess, quite conceptual, and by that I kind of mean bad. No, they're not bad. They're quite interesting cocktails, and I'm going to talk you through them as we serve them. Caps are serving them perfectly on time, which is ideal. The first drink you're going to taste today, rather fittingly, is called Congregate, which is what we do when we go to bars, of course. And the drink is kind of like a deconstruct, reconstruct of beer. Looking at beer, you know, we've got kind of malt flavors and fizz in there, and alcohol, of course. And what I've done is I've combined Belvedere vodka with a rye malt syrup, and of course Belvedere is made from rye, some soda water, and then it's been bittered using our wormwood tincture. We're also going to pass around a little bit of that wormwood in atomizers, so if you want to up the bitterness of your drink, you can. Weirdly, it doesn't taste like a beer. Because it's not a beer, it's actually taken on more of an identity of like an Amaro or an Americano style cocktail, but very malty and kind of interesting. Now, why beer? Well, A, it's the kind of starting point of Belvedere, which are the sponsors of this talk, but also because it's the oldest alcoholic drink that we have. Humans have been brewing beer for around about 10,000 years. Now, the starting point of that beer may have been rice in China, or it may have been cereal grains, you know, closer to Europe or in the Middle East. But one way or another, it's been fermented, malted, and turned into alcohol. The oldest written reference to beer is Sumerian. It's about 5,000 years old, and it's basically a receipt. It was carved into stone, so quite a time-consuming receipt. But it was for a sale of transfer of beer, and in that time, beer was basically being used as a currency. Now, since currency is one of the kind of building blocks of civilization, as along with many other things, of course, political system, etc., that kind of means that beer is civilization, which is pretty cool for us because we're bartenders. But of course, if beer is civilization, the reverse must be true, which means that civilization is beer. How cool is that? Now, this little picture here actually was a few hundred years later, and this, as far as I can tell, is the oldest image we have of humans drinking alcohol. And they're drinking beer. You can see these pots here with straws coming out. The reason they did that is because the beer was unfiltered. It was kind of had all the mash and everything still in there. So they dunked the straws in and suck it up. And away they went. But the most important thing about this image is not the fact they're drinking beer, not the fact they're using straws, it's the fact that they're drinking together. And that leads us on to the next bit, which Claire's going to talk about.
So why do we go to the bar in the first place? Why don't we just sit at home alone drinking? Well, of course, many people do, and you can drink alcohol alone, but it's more socially accepted to drink in cultures. And one thing used universally acknowledged across many cultures is that we love to meet and to drink. Drinking is a social act rather than a social act, an antisocial act. And drinking is a social activity in the company of others, and it's considered inappropriate and suspicious to drink alone. And this is actually taken from a book that looks at Japanese drinking cultures. Drinking does not in any society take place just anywhere, and in fact most cultures have designated environments for communal drinking. And much anthropology is interested in drinking sites. People spend a great deal of time drinking in places where it's socially acceptable, and at the times where it's socially acceptable. So for instance, in Britain, we don't typically drink in a pub outside of licensing hours. Some of us do, it's called a locking, but for the purposes of this seminar, we don't typically drink outside of licensing hours in the UK. Most Americans, for instance, don't drink a martini in the den for breakfast. And most Italians don't have a beer during Mass. Drinking places are locations where other significant behaviours are evident and where other things of importance occur. In this incredible book, that if anybody is interested in the study of anthropology, particularly of places, I do recommend. This incredible book was written in 1989 by a guy called Ray Oldenburg. It's called The Great Good Place. And Ray stressed the importance within modern societies of the so-called third place. Any place where people regularly meet for relaxation outside of the home or work. They're typified by their open and democratic and informality. For Oldenburg, they are a major contributor to the maintenance and social capital of a healthy community life. And Oldenburg is pretty obsessed with community. He says, daily life, in order to be relaxed and fulfilling, must find its balance in three realms of experience. One is domestic, a second is gainful and productive, and the third is inclusively sociable, offering both the basis of community and the celebration of it. And this third place can be, the attributes of a third place are as follows. It's a neutral ground, so it's a leveller. The ideologies of egalitarianism, everybody is the same. Social differences are forbidden or diminished. There must be places where individuals may come and go as they please, in which no one is required to play host, and in which we all feel at home and comfortable. Conversation as the main activity. Accessibility and accommodation. You should be able to get to your third place by foot. Regulars. The third place is just so much space unless the right people are there to make it come alive, and they are the regulars. As for the place itself, in order to become the meeting space of the group, it has to adopt the symbols of that group and to identify with it. Playfulness. Liminal space, a sensorial threshold. Joy and acceptance reign over anxiety and alienation. No one wants to go to a third place where they feel anxious or alienated. And finally, a home away from home. Though a radically different kind of setting from the home, the third place is remarkably similar to a good home in the psychological comfort and support that it extends. Now, the pub, of course, is emblematic of the third place, and while a defining feature of the pub is that it's not home, Oldenburg suggests that it nevertheless expresses key aspects of homeliness, which make it attractive. These include a physical root, so somewhere that you actually go to rather than just any sort of generic place. A sense of possession, as in, this is my local, this is where I go, to be with the people I want to be with. A site of regeneration and restoration, so you go there to feel good. A sense of freedom to be, of informality, and finally a sense of warmth. Together, all these features serve key psychological needs. So when individuals are coming into a pub, they're purchasing far more than just a drink or a meal. They are also purchasing an experience or ambience which is associated with desire and the creation and expression of identity and lifestyle. What's important is not so much the actual products that are consumed, but the meanings attached to those products. So you might think that you're going to the pub at the end of the road just for a beer, but actually you're going there for so much more. You're going there to feel restored, to have a sense of warmth or homeliness that you might not necessarily find at home. But consider, of course, how much has changed in the last 26 years since Oldenburg gave us his book. Today, Generation Y, or the millennial consumer, is comfortable with third places and with using virtual third places to complement or substitute for physical third places. And in addition, many of the key aspects of Oldenburg's third place are becoming, sadly, less relevant, such as conversation, the smartphone and the death of the conversation. Oldenburg suggests there are rules to conversation, and how many today do we respect? His rules are that you should remain silent and share your time. So don't speak over other people when you're trying to tell your stories. Be attentive while others are talking. Say what you think, but be careful. Avoid topics not of general interest. Say little or nothing about yourself personally, but allow others to talk about themselves. Avoid trying to instruct. Speak in a low voice as others will hear. I think we speak in such low voices today because we spend much of our time looking at our iPhones and updating our status and not necessarily speaking to the people around us. Another aspect of Oldenburg's third place that's becoming less relevant is accessibility and accommodation. The idea that third place must be easily accessible, ideally on foot. Consider how far we now go to have an experience of a destination bar. Third places that render the best and fullest service are those which one may go alone at almost any time of the day or evening with assurances that acquaintances will be there. The world is much smaller now, and we travel further to get these sorts of experiences. So accessibility and accommodation, as Oldenburg would have it, is becoming less and less important for us. Regulars. Who's a regular anymore? Do you know the regulars that come into your bar or your hotel bar or your restaurant? Because of globalization, who is truly a regular? This is becoming less and less valid as an aspect of the third place. And finally, home away from home. The pub provides a particular type of freedom within modern industrial society, but does this actually look like your home? Does this have any aspect of homeliness to it? So what constitutes a third place today? We decided to run a couple of case studies, the first being the dead rabbit. The dead rabbit is a great example of the importance of community. Pubs, and this is a quote from the Anthropology of Pubs, the identity and role of the pub. And this, for me, is almost a definition of the dead rabbit and what they're trying to achieve. Pubs have much to do with habit and repetition as expressed in the term regular. They may offer a real sense of continuity, regularity and order that is fundamental to a sense of place, time and security. Pubs have always been closely related to everyday community life. So let's have a quick check back to see what the dead rabbit does so well in order to make it such a defining third place according to Oldenburg. So we have on the left-hand side Oldenburg's key checklist of what makes a great third place. And on the right, an interview that was conducted by the Business Insider in 2015. So the Dead Rabbit is a modern bar. Of course, it was launched in 2013, but it's also a take on the traditional Irish pub concept, tapping into a globally recognised and reassuringly familiar third place. It has an old-fashioned style that makes you feel like a regular, even though you might not yet be. Customers are a mix of regulars who work in the financial district, tourists, and of course, every single bartender under the sun. So the dead rabbit symbolises aspects of homeliness which make it attractive. And on the right, here's the quote. Owners Sean and Jack emigrated from Belfast, Northern Ireland, 4 years ago with a dream of opening a pub that reminded them of home. So homeliness, check. It includes a physical centre or route. And in the case of Dead Rabbit, island, and what it means to be authentically Irish versus commoditised Ireland. So you won't find a neon Guinness sign in the window, nor any shamrock lanyards around bartenders' necks. The Dead Rabbit serves 145 varieties of Irish whiskey and 100% authenticity. The Dead Rabbit also has a sense of possession, as in my local. The crowd is a mix of regulars who work in the financial district and tourists who've heard of Dead Rabbit's reputation from across the pond. It also has a sense of freedom to be and a sense of regeneration and restoration. Together, so despite its accolades, the Dead Rabbit remains entirely unpretentious. Bartenders welcome regulars by name and pour warming drinks heavy on the liquor. It's the Irish way. Together, all of these serve key psychological needs for the Dead Rabbit's consumer, which is why the Dead Rabbit is the best bar in America, according to not only just the Business Insider, but many of us at Tales of the Cocktail as well. But of course, today, the modern bar is much more of a diverse place. It's not all about the pub or examples of the pub as expressed like Dead Rabbit. The modern bar is increasingly a third place that needs not only to provide regeneration and restoration, but offers experiences designed to enlighten, educate, or entertain. Another great book, written by Christian Makunda in 2004, Brand Lands and Hotspots and Cool Spaces, introduces us to third places around the globe that link the desire for entertainment with emotion and attract sales by putting customers in the right mood. These places not only make us feel good when we are there, but they create new experience worlds where art and science meet. These staged habitats allow our visitors to recharge themselves with emotion. Within these types of staged environments, Makunda observes a core function is complemented by an emotional extra of almost equal value. This means that shops double as tourist attractions, hotels double as meeting places that exemplify lifestyle, and museums double as malls and places to re-energize. So you don't just go to Night Town to buy a pair of sneakers or trainers, you go there to feel that you belong with that sort of community. Equally, you don't necessarily just go to the New Whitney Museum in New York to look at the art. You can also go there and use it as a shopping mall. And the one in the bottom right corner is Liberty in London, and again, that's a beautiful place that people go to shop, but also to consider as a tourist attraction. So, while Oldenburg describes plainness as a key aspect of third places because it reduces self-consciousness and pretension, Makunda argues that some third places allow people to reload themselves with their lifestyle. Where would you rather be? What's your example of a great third place? It's impossible not to see the contrast between Oldenburg's vision of the third place and Makunda's as a generational one, with Makunda's third place being designed to fit the needs of a stressed-out, time-pressured generation, which not only wants to get relief from everyday life, but to get it quickly and flamboyantly, to provide a quick massage of the soul for the stressed-out customer. Makunda explores the live experiences that offer higher collective value and offers reasons why these types of urban entertainment centres, such as bars, restaurants, flagship stores and lounges, seem to stand out amongst their peers. By exploring the emotions they conjure and the excitement they generate for customers and visitors, Makunda argues that innovative thinking and emotional appeal can be used to draw attention and create successful marketing. And for a great example of this, we need look no further than the Artesian at the Langham. Drinking at the Artesian is a cocktail lover's equivalent of a night out at the theatre. And for Alex, the glass is a stage and a way to communicate with their guest. Perhaps one of the reasons why the Artesian is considered the world's best bar is the ability of the team to create the impression of community, of familiarity, of regularity, despite there being no community in the same sense as the one found in your local pub. Many of the guests are transitory, they are hotel guests, or they're visiting from afar. However, the Artesian communicates through entertainment, recharging the guest with emotion and becoming the ultimate third place. We asked Alex to give us a bit of an insight as to why he feels the Artesian is such a fantastic example of the new modern bar third place. He says, when we opened the Artesian, my philosophy was that stuffy, classic, old-fashioned hotel bar with its jazz music and arrogant staff was the last place anyone would want to be drinking. We've taken out all of the crap and kept everything what makes a great bar. The Artesian is a social hub where you pop in for one and 6 hours later you realise you're still here. It's a place where time doesn't matter and because everyone's having a good time. Our cocktails might not be for everyone, but they are for anyone with an opened mind. The Artesian guests may not have their community around them in the traditional Oldenburg sense, or they may be alone with people they don't know very well. But Alex and his team establish quick emotional connections by encouraging relationships in the form of the shared experience. The guest is included in the performance, diverted by the magic, and becomes the audience at the theatre of the bar. This shared experience disguises a lack of community or regularity and replaces it with a sense of wonder, amusement, and entertainment, which can be either shared with others in the bar, the community, or in the wider virtual community. Either way, sharing is key to feeling reassurance as well as driving a sense of belonging and kinship. Scientists speculate that we humans are built to automatically imagine and simulate how others see, hear, taste, smell, and feel things. And that these imaginings shape our experience of the world. We spend time every day in the company of others, but without explicit communication. Our lives unfold socially, but silently. And even in the silence, good experiences get better and bad experiences get worse. The power of two, why sharing is better. So today, consumers are increasingly looking for experiences that are unique, personalised, entertaining, relevant, authentic, not in large spaces, so intimate, and have a form of added value, often promoted via sharing on social media and word of mouth. On paper, the Dead Rabbit and the Artesian are two world-class examples of modern bars that play very different roles, demonstrating the evolving concept of that third place, from traditional, a site of regeneration and restoration, to the theatrical, a place to recharge with emotion. Both place the guest at the heart of that experience, either providing the space for them to be in the experience, the community, or to be a spectator of the experience, theatre. This creates the impression of community through shared experiences, either physical or simulated. So whether it's at the end of the road or at the end of a journey to an unfamiliar place, the modern bar is not just a place to meet other people, but an instrument which helps the individual reinforce who they are by feeling part of a wider community. Who we are, however, is not constant. And the concept of identity is today more fleeting than it's ever been. Bars that clearly articulate who they are and what they offer, as well as give the customer the opportunity to share in that vision, are more likely to succeed than bars are trying to be everything to everybody. In order to stand out from your competitors or to excite your customers or to encourage them to stay at your venue for longer, an emotional connection between your guest and your brand needs to be established. After all, without trust, there is no love. Which begs the question, where do you go to find your third place? Where do you go to relax informally amongst friends if your third place is also your workplace? If you work in hospitality, consider the importance of recharging with emotion in a space that's not a bar and a separate, equally restorative place. So the takeaways from the first section are as follows. Not everyone wants to feel like a regular, but many do. Create the impression of regularity by providing either a home away from home or by building a strong virtual community so many guests feel like they know you. The modern bar is increasingly becoming an anti-social hangout where smartphones replace connection and conversation, and checking in leads to checking out from our community. How do we get back to being social? And consider whether you are recharging your guests with emotion or providing a site of regeneration and restoration. Define your role in the customer's life and build a connection beyond a commercial one.
Thank you. Right, you've got your next drink. Before anyone walks out, by the way, Kluger fans, he's coming on next, all right? Clugettes, I think, would be the female term for, yeah. So, second drink. This one is called Medicated. I'm going to do a joke here that may not work. Medicated, not to be confused with Medicaid, okay, the health system, because that would be like calling a cocktail in the UK National Health Service. Did we get that? Yeah? That's kind of okay. The Brits get it anyway, that's the main thing. That's not the main thing. Everyone's equal, right? So, this is a medicinally inspired cocktail, and the reason for that is going to all become apparent. What we've done is we've used Belvedere Intense, so slightly higher strength, 50% ABV, and we've combined that with a placebo wine. That's the term that I came up with. It's basically a vermouth, but homemade, and all of the ingredients in there are traditionally medicinal in some way or another. So we've got things like guarana, we've got wormwood, again. You're getting a double dose of wormwood today. Watch out for your thujone content and potential. We've got things like, I'm having a blank, licorice root, fennel seed ground down as well. Lots and lots of different medicinal things. Give it a try, see what you think. The garnish is a little bit different. It's actually a cod liver oil capsule. You're at Tails, you're going to need all this stuff for healthy muscles and things like that because you're putting a lot of other things in your body, medicating elsewhere. So now that I look at it, I'm like, when you eat that, is it just going to burst in your mouth and you're going to get a mouthful of cod liver oil? Probably. But there's nothing like a bad tasting garnish to make a drink taste really nice, right? So give that a go. Now, medicine and the bar room in a modern sense might seem like kind of opposing concepts. Because obviously we're prescribing a drug, but any good bartender knows that historically, I don't want to join the monthly own Wi-Fi, thank you. Any good bartender knows historically that of course the two go hand in hand. You look back at the origins of Scotch whiskey when whiskey turned up on the shores of Scotland back in 1505. It was the surgeon barbers in Edinburgh that were in charge of creating the stuff. By the way, barbers back then were kind of held in really high regard, along with surgeons. It sucks to be a barber these days because you're just not as good as a surgeon, obviously. Gin as well is another great example of a category that has its roots in medicine. Juniper infusions and distillates are, of course, used for curing stomach illnesses and kidney stones and all these sorts of things. And virtually any liqueur that you care to look at these days that has had any great success, chances are it had its roots in medicine and such things like that. So, if alcohol is medicine, then it stands to reason the bartender is, to a certain extent, a doctor, or a pharmacist, or a medicine man.
So, I am the one person here not in the alcohol industry. I'm the science guy, which means I am completely unqualified to be standing on this stage today. But I will turn that vice into a virtue because there are deep anthropological roots to what goes on in a bar. And I do want to address the idea first of the bartender as the medicine man and the lawgiver. Now, all human beings belong to fixed communities. Your country, your city, your job, your family, and in all of those communities, the lines of authority run up to one primal ruler. The president, the mayor, your boss, your parents. We're part of fleeting communities too. In the subway, the conductor is king. The same is true of the usher in a movie theater or the manager in a store. We surrender our authority, our autonomy to these people all the time. And this is especially so when the person to whom we're surrendering our authority has a special skill. We dress our judges in robes and address them as your honor because we want to remind ourselves of the wisdom with which we invest them. I have doctors who are younger than me, but I address the doctor as Dr. So-and-so, and the doctor addresses me by my first name because it's a reminder that I am entrusting you with my health, so I will show respect because that gives me a sort of magical talismanic feeling that you're going to make me well. A lot of this plays out in other subtler ways with a bartender. Bartenders serve customers, yes. So in that sense, they're in a subordinate position. But remember, the mayor is the servant of the city. We pay the mayor out of our own pocket. And yet there's no question about who's in charge nonetheless. There are many reasons that the lines of authority in a bar run straight up to the bartender or bartenders. For one thing, very simply, pragmatically, the bartender has the ad hoc legal authority of the establishment. It's the bartender who can summon a bouncer and throw you out if you misbehave. It's the bartender who can refuse to serve you if you're overserved. It's the bartender who can summon the police if you've misbehaved very badly. But there's also, again, the authority that comes from a very powerful, very special, and very intimate skill. And that is the ability to mix something that you are going to trust that person enough to put in your body. And unlike other things, other foods and drinks you put in your body, this one has the power to alter your state of consciousness. There's a profound level of trust in that. It's part of a deep tradition that goes back millennia to the medicine man and the shamans of ancient people. Mayan Mexican medicine men used peyote, morning glory, mushrooms, tobacco, alcohol again, to achieve altered states of consciousness and awareness in the people within their tribe. They were called upon with this power, invested in this power to develop magical elixirs. They were called upon to heal breaches in their communities. When there was a divorce, when there was a crime, when there was a murder, it would be the medicine man who would be the mediator and the peacemaker. Medicine men would even encourage drunken binges on the thinking that rage, anger, ugly, untake-backable remarks that were said during a drunken binge could be excused because it's the alcohol talking. And yet the feelings were vented, the statements were said, and everybody can then move on. Now, a smart bartender won't deliberately get customers drunk, of course, but will be able to monitor the crowd and know that an argument or a debate is either being simply animated by alcohol or it's being driven and being turned into a conflagration by alcohol, and that's entirely different. A recent story, and Tristan will have one thought on that here. Thank you for stopping. She's our traffic cop.
I'm quite excited about this next bit. Actually, not a drink, but a movie clip that I've been waiting to play in a seminar for about 10 years now. Genuinely, this next clip is probably one of the cult movies from my childhood that actually inspired me to become a bartender. It's Back to the Future Part 3. Not the best of the series, that would be 2, but we can talk about that afterwards. I'm going to let Claire play it now, and then we'll have a little debrief afterwards.
Amen. Damn it, no! Come on, Doc. Wake up. Wake up, Doc. How many do you have?
Just the one.
Just the one? Come on, Doc.
There's a fella that can't hold his liquor.
Give me some coffee.
You want to sober him up in a hurry, son, you're going to have to use something a lot stronger than coffee.
Yeah, what do you suggest?
Joey, let's make some wake-up juice.
Come on, Doc.
In about 10 minutes, he's going to be as sober as a priest on Sunday.
So the idea of being able to prepare medicine like that behind a bar was quite a compelling thing for a young Tristan Stephenson, and yeah, maybe the one thing that resulted in my whole career. But it's kind of still relevant today. You know, this trust, as Jeff is talking about, that we place in the bartender, and this idea that you know they're the appointed proprietor, they're in charge of us, and it's definitely something that we still see today. We look to them.
Now, in a less entertaining but somewhat more substantive way, this issue was addressed by a recent story by bartender Al Sotak on the site Munchies. And he had a more contemporary take on this, arguing that even though bartenders are in the hospitality industry, they are still legally authorized and indeed responsible to be inhospitable to a customer who's breaking the rules of the bar, who's breaking the social contract by behaving badly. A response on Facebook by bartender Nicholas Jarrett from New Orleans' own Cure framed this strongly. And the Jarrett quotes read, "We serve a mind-altering substance at the edge of politic society. Nobody roofies another table's entree. People don't, as a rule, get into their car after some satisfying dishes, bulldoze into a biker, and then speed off. High-end, service-oriented restaurants take people on a tour of heaven. They're not in the business of ferrying folks over the river and getting them back again safe. The decisions we make on whom we serve, when to serve them, and how much they ought to have basis are profoundly hard, important, and affect people beyond the person served. A host shares responsibility for the actions of his or her guests. It's sad that it's necessary to legally codify that responsibility because people can't be trusted not to shirk it." So this is one area in which we realize that a bartender is a social caretaker. A bartender is somebody who says, "I will be your trafficker in an intoxicating substance, but I will be the most responsible trafficker you've ever had." Now, this is especially true when a bartender is overseeing one of the other great functions of a bar, which is as a mating site, as territory, and as a behavior shaper. Now, there are a lot of reasons bars are powerful parts of the human mating experience, not the least of which is that we've just tacitly agreed they will be. A single man or woman who walks into a bar may really be there just for a drink, or just to watch a ball game, or just to meet a friend after work. But there's a certain presumption on the part of everyone else in the bar, particularly if it's a singles bar, that sex may be somehow in play. Now, this isn't the case when you meet an attractive person in your podiatrist's office or your lawyer's office. You don't come on to somebody who's there to have a bunion repaired. That's just not how romance works. There's another reason for the romantically charged atmosphere of a bar, which is, of course, the disinhibiting power of alcohol. We all become sexually more confident. We all become sexually more desirous, even if we don't become sexually more desirable, and that's part of the problem. The physical intimacy of a crowded bar, the atmospheric intimacy of the low lighting, the proximity of bodies pressed together in what's unusual. This is actually very arousing. I think I have to leave the room. But all of this, just the description of the bar, is one of the reasons it's sort of a hothouse for sexuality. Now, romance plays out in a lot of ways in the people we choose to accompany us to a bar. Women often arrive in groups, and it's for the unconscious but very real purpose of protecting themselves against overly aggressive men. Women together can be, especially if you're a man and you're observing it, there's a very sweet and caretaking thing that goes on in which all four of those women in a group will eyeball a man who is making overtures to one of them and will tacitly, subtly dispatch that person if it's safe. If they don't deem it safe, there's all manner of ways of calling her back. This is something women do for one another that men tend not to do. Men arrive in groups for a variety of other reasons. Part of this has something that goes back into deep human tribalism and doesn't really say a lot for us. Human tribes are, as the name suggests, very individual, very insular, and we have a basic primal resistance, a wariness about meeting or particularly breeding with members of other tribes. This is how you get stories of doomed romances like West Side Story or Romeo and Juliet. And as in those stories, and the Montagues and the Capulets and the Jets and the Sharks, it's bands of patrolling men who protect the women in their tribe from the encroachment of women in other tribes. Status lines in these packs of men are very important too. Alpha males in both human and animal communities tend to attract the most highly valued, highly breedable females. This is all very reductionist, and it doesn't stand up to contemporary political consciousness, but it's nonetheless a part of how these things play out. But this doesn't mean that beta males have to suffer by comparison. Their own status is enhanced by associating with the alpha male, which is why you get shows like Entourage, which is why you get people, males, who are so willing to associate to be part of the posse of a famous athlete or a famous movie star. It's part of being around somebody in whose reflected glory you can bask. It also enhances the beta male's own mating possibilities, because the women the alpha male turns down may be willing to settle for you. That's how most people in my peer group ever met women at bars. No surprise, a woman who meets a man at a bar requires a lot more information about that man before she will go home with him or even date him than a man requires about a woman. Now, this goes back to the sociobiological fact that sperm are cheap and ova are extremely expensive. A man is impelled to spend this highly devalued currency as much as he possibly can in order to ensure that his genes, as many of his genes as possible, make it over to the next generation. Women, of course, are impelled to breed too, but selectively, carefully, because child rearing and child bearing is an extremely expensive proposition, and I don't just mean in terms of money. It's expensive in terms of calorie, energy, time, years, and the toll it takes on the woman's body. So women breed much more selectively. In a bar where mating behavior is a front burner possibility, all of this is in powerful play. And a lot of it is in play in terms of territoriality. This graphic I love. It's actually about a church here, because you can see the prayer books. But it's how seats are saved in churches. And there's something like this going on in a bar. The New York City subway has launched a campaign against what is becoming creepily but aptly known as manspreading. The tendency of males, particularly young males, to sit with their knees splayed apart, thus discouraging other people from sitting anywhere near them. This is also, if you study lower primate behavior, what's known as a genital display, but we don't really have to get into that here, and we probably don't want to. People behave that way in bars in similar ways. Broad gesturing, for example, which I do up here, but that's just a habit. But in a bar, it's a way of claiming turf. If Claire is sitting here and someone else is sitting here and I'm gesturing broadly, they edge away. I've claimed turf. If I'm trying to impress a female, that's one way of saying, I will find us a good homestead. None of this is conscious. It's all very unconscious. Volume is another turf claimer. What you can't claim physically, you claim auditorily. So loud laughter, loud speaking is a way of claiming the three-dimensional space of everybody else in the room. Alpha males, particularly if they're intending to impress a woman next to them, will often double down on this with a glare or a comment along the lines of, don't jostle the lady, if another man comes too close or reaches across the woman who he's interested in order to, if he's reaching across, and it's a way of being protective. The very nature of a bar, however, will keep a lot of this acting out in check. Most people calibrate their behavior up or down, dependent upon the atmosphere of where they are. Loud laughter or loud conversation in a rowdy bar breeds more loud laughter and more conversation. Flirtatiousness in a singles bar breeds more flirtatiousness. The opposite applies as well. Failing to conform, to be too loud, to be too demonstrative in a high-end, high-priced, quiet hotel bar with a piano tinkling in the background will get a customer shunned by other customers or cut off or even ejected by the bartender. Now, we all think we're individuals. We all think that we assert ourselves. But as this wonderful clip that Claire found from Candid Camera in 1963 shows, even when it's irrational, we conform to what the people around us are doing.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat maintain his individuality. But little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear, and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
This comes from, and I know I'm slightly off script here, but this comes from the idea of fear of banishment. Conformity is very important. There's safety in community. Back in the days when we were tribes, there is safety being in the campfire. To be banished beyond the light and the warmth and the circle of the campfire is a primally terrifying thing for people. So it expresses its ways, and it expresses itself in very small ways like this. Now, something that's helpful in bars, when customers act out, when you inform a customer that you no longer want to do business with them because they've broken the unwritten rules of the bar, you'll experience an interesting phenomenon. The irate customer, the misbehaving customer, the overserved customer will realize they've gone too far and typically rein their behavior back in. When this happens, you've done both that customer and your employees a great service. The offending customer is able to atone for what he's done, and we'll say he, because typically males misbehave more than females, and is able to regain the favor of the lawgiver, the bartender. Your employees will see that you value their comfort and their safety enough not to do business with a customer, even one who may be providing a lot of revenue for the bar. And that builds goodwill between bartender and employee. Of course, selling drinks isn't the only business that's associated with a bar. Tristan, I did it again. I'm a narcissist. I never yield them up.
Yeah, Jeff's latest book plug there. Was it The Narcissist Next Door?
That was
The Narcissist.
Still available in all fine stores.
Yeah. Well, just a quick story about that. When James I came to the throne in England, there was a noble who hosted a dinner and invited various different people from all over parts of the company, all very, very, top-notch people in society. And at one time during the dinner, a general called Somerset stood up and made an announcement. Now, you've got to bear in mind, at this point, they'd already had a few drinks. Glasses had been filled, emptied. So there was an air of drunkenness in the scene. I'm going to have to read this bit. So Somerset stands up and he says, "Gentlemen, when I'm in my cups," and what that means is when I've drunk a lot of booze, "and the generous wine begins to warm my blood, I have an absurd custom of railing against the Scottish people. Knowing my weakness, I hope no gentleman in the company will take it amiss." So he's kind of starting a fight, basically, with anyone Scottish who happens to be hanging around. Now, if you know anyone Scottish, you know that they don't generally take too kindly to that. There was a Scottish man there. And this guy, Sir Robert Blackie, from Blair Athol, there he is, stands up, also having drunk his fair share, and replies, "Gentlemen, when I am in my cups and the generous wine begins to warm my blood, if I hear a man rail against the Scottish people, I have an absurd custom of kicking him at once out of the company, often breaking a few of his bones in the process. Knowing my weakness, I hope no gentleman will take it amiss." So, obviously Somerset that particular evening didn't start railing against the Scottish, having kind of had a threat come back. But the moral of the story is that since societies like individuals get the sorts of drunken comportment that they allow, they deserve what they get. Now, on to something lighter, your next drink, number 3, which is called toast. Now, we're going to do a toast in a minute, but hold back for a second. The term toast, if anyone's done their research, will know that it comes from this practice of drinking drinks with toast. It sounds so simple it can't possibly be true, but that's the custom. You go back to kind of the Middle Ages, slightly beyond. Shakespeare wrote about it, actually. They would drink a drink and they would have a slice of toast or a biscuit. Now you know why you've got a bag of biscuits in front of you. Although I'm not sure that's still an explanation for it, really. But anyway, or a biscuit with their drink. Now, toasting, whether you're doing or not with biscuits, is quite a powerful thing when you start to think about it. Everyone drinks the same drink at the same time in the same volume. It's bad to toast with an empty glass. It's bad to toast with non-alcoholic drink. Bad to toast too late or too early. And it's also kind of seen as bad form if you don't clink glasses as well. But in the simplest possible way, a toast is all about trust. It's a little bit like a handshake. I shake with my hand to show to you that I'm not carrying a machete or an Uzi, and we're friends. I don't want to kill you. And the toast is like that. By sharing the same drink, the same volume and glasses at the same time, I'm kind of showing to you that I've not poisoned your drink, and I don't feel any ill will towards you. But beyond that, through this expression of trust, the toast has evolved into a surprisingly dynamic tool in the human social arsenal. Most simple of all, between us guys, it serves as a kind of covenant between friends, between families, between hot dates. But with business associates or political leaders, people in positions of power, it's also a powerful device in the bargaining process. It kind of indicates the end of negotiation and the beginning of agreement. Have you ever felt reluctant to toast through dislike or disapproval of the circumstances? Well, that perhaps is the best example of the power of the toast. The brooding and that reluctance, or the regret of having done a toast. In a large busy bar, a toast can provide a moment of pause and reflection, where otherwise the high energy circumstances would disallow it. In hostile circumstances, if I bump into someone in a bar, a toast can provide a kind of anchor, a tempering action, a resetting of the boundaries. Some of us toast when we're on our own, even. To an absent friend, to distant ancestors, to the stars in the sky, or just to yourself. To emphasize this point, right now, we're going to do a toast, and in your participation in that toast, whether consciously or not, you'll be investing in the persuasiveness of our rhetoric. So, we're going to toast to some Belvedere. It's a neat shot. It's been chilled, nothing else. I'd love to tell you that I created that, but in fact, probably Claire is a lot more responsible for that, given that she's in charge of spirit creation for Belvedere. Also, because I'm introducing it and not Claire, it means that we can call this a shot or a shooter, because the Belvedere marking code wouldn't allow her to do that, but it's absolutely fine. I don't work for Belvedere. So, yep, on the count of 5, we're all going to do a shot together.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Shots.
I have just lost my sobriety. I'm not sure I can go on. before this gets into my system, let me go on with my last category, which is the bar as a workplace, a news source, and a caucus room. Every business transaction is a relationship. I buy a hammer in a hardware store. The clerk and I briefly are having the relationship of a sale. I get home, I forget that relationship as soon as I take my purchase out of the bag. A business deal is a much more enduring alliance. It's something that will continue for years, for decades, maybe past the lifetimes of the negotiators themselves. And so the negotiations may be conducted over alcohol in a bar. The disinhibiting power of alcohol, again, plays a role here, as does, once again, the physical intimacy and the atmospheric intimacy of a bar. There's also a sense of bonding in the still slightly naughty and forbidden nature of being in a bar in the first place, especially if we get drunk there. We may wish the next day that we hadn't taken a colleague in a one-armed hug and said, "I love this guy." But the fact is, the feeling, even if it was chemically mediated, was at least fleetingly there, and it's one that endures. And this is especially so if the other person reciprocates, but it can be awkward if the other person doesn't. I'm going to play a tape here that was recorded not long before Richard Nixon resigned. It was the night he was forced to fire several of his key aides, including Bob Haldeman and John Ehrlichman. That's Haldeman on the right, walking with Nixon. He went on TV, he made the announcement, he fired them both, hoping to put Watergate behind him. Later that night, Nixon, who was a famous drunk, called Haldeman, who never drank, and talked to him about what had happened the night before. Listen to this tape. It is equal parts grotesque and delicious.
Hello.
Hi.
Hope I didn't let you down.
No, sir. You got your points over, and now you got it set right and move on. You're right where you ought to be.
Well, it's a tough thing, Bob, for you, for John, the rest, but goddamn it, I'm never going to discuss this son of a bitching Watergate thing again. Never, 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 never. Don't you agree?
Yes, sir. You've done it now, and you've laid out your position. You've laid out you've taken your steps. You've put the
interesting thing, you know, we haven't heard the only cabinet officer that is called, and this is 50 minutes after the thing is over, is Cap Weinberger, bless his soul. All the rest, you know, are waiting to see what the polls show. Goddamn strong cabinet, isn't it?
Oh, you better check and be sure, because they may, you know, we've had a...
No. They know who to call, you know. They know they can get through. But in any event, I just want you to know that Cap called, and he was all the way.
Good.
But let me say, you're a strong man, God damn it, and I love you. And I love John. All the rest, and by God, keep the faith. Keep the faith. You're going to win this son of a bitch.
Absolutely.
You notice what I said about the violence and so forth on the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some intricacies in this that only the sophisticates will understand.
I got those, and I want to get the text because there's some things to work on from there that we can build.
I thought it was good too to sort of end on what I deeply felt, you know, the religious note, you know.
Yes.
God bless America. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it must have, you know, driven you up the wall. Didn't drive me up the wall, but I felt that way. I'm all for that. Completely agree. I don't know whether you can call and get any reactions and call me back, like the old style. Would you mind?
I don't think I can.
No, I agree. I don't.
Have an odd spot to try and do
Don't call a goddamn soul. The hell with it. Let me just say, getting this call from you, I haven't heard from any cabinet officer except Weinberger an hour afterwards, and thank God, and no staff member.
Well, now when I called, the board said they were instructed not to put any calls through. So
the hell with that. I told them to put all the calls through.
Well, that may be why you haven't gotten them, though, because that's all right. What you told me.
I'll change it. Right. Fine, but God bless you, boy. Okay. God bless you. I love you, you know.
How we got from Washington and Lincoln to that, I don't know. Now, this is there's a bit of awkwardness here, obviously, because Nixon was drunk and Haldeman wasn't. But when two people are drunk in a bar, and they're reciprocally silly and sloppy like that, you do get something that's a little bit like the sense of mutually assured destruction between the U.S. and the Soviets in the Cold War. I can annihilate you, you can annihilate me, I saw you misbehave, you saw me misbehave. That's not the most honest way to forge a relationship, but it's a good way to forge a permanent relationship. And there's one more clip, which is... are we going back to Gore? Which are we doing? Okay. It is one of the reasons that Al Gore... I don't know where Claire found this, but this must be what every summer with Al Gore looks like. But one of Gore's problems during the 2000 campaign was that he lost what was called the beer primary. People found it easier to picture having a drink with George W. Bush than they did having a drink with Al Gore, which was the great irony, because it was Bush who quit drinking at age 40 altogether, so by the time he ran for president, he had been sober for 20-some years, and it was Gore who was still a drinker. But the idea of drinking, or the idea of at least the relatability that comes from being perceived as a drinker, is a very powerful thing. Now, one other thing, we have one other clip that we find amusing that sort of captures how people can bond in their first business encounter, and this is Matthew McConaughey. And
Mr. Hanna, what can I bring for you on this glorious afternoon?
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're gonna bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7½ minutes after that, you're gonna bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that, every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
I'm good with water for now, though. Thank you. It's his first day on Wall Street. Give him time.
Okay, and so other kinds of business are conducted in bars as well. And sometimes it's simply the informal business of being a citizen. Even before telephones, radios, newsreels, and certainly the internet were invented, taverns were the place where news was swapped and gossip was exchanged. During the Revolutionary War, good taverns would keep supplies of newspapers on hand, and if there happened to be a literate customer there, which was by no means a sure thing back then, that customer would read the newspapers aloud to the rest of the customers in the bar. According to the book Revolutionary Taverns, quote, "From the vantage point of your table, the war would unfold before you in printed form and through heated debate. Industry towns such as Pittsburgh, which was built on steel, or Detroit, which of course was built on cars, also played this out in another way, in which they became gathering places for people within the industry. If a strike was coming, it would be in the working man's tavern that the news of it was spread, or the strike itself was incited. And the same remains true now for any bar that caters to particular industries. The book Taverns and Drinking in Early America explains that such cultural connections, and I love this quote, pushed the tavern trade as a whole toward the service of knots of men rightly sorted, and that's K-N-O-T-S. That social function remains. All this applies to when people come to a bar to share a cultural experience. You can watch the final game of the World Cup, or a close election, or the first moon landing alone in your home, and you can have that experience. Or you can come to a bar for the primal, tribal experience of being with a group of other people who are sharing your joy or your disappointment or your tears. Threshold experiences like this are far more powerful in the moment and in the memory when you're in the company of people having the same feelings you are. The bar, we came to conclude in our work on this, is sort of the human experience writ small, but it's also writ powerfully. It's a place where people assemble, where they draw close to one another. The need to be with other people, with other humans, is one of the greatest of our human impulses, and bars are one of the greatest places to indulge it and embrace it. Thank you.
There's one more drink to come as well, which is en route. The final drink's called Celebrate, and it's pretty obvious why. You know, we need to celebrate, everything we've talked about, the anthropology of the bar, and how, our society, our culture, and everything is kind of encapsulated within that environment. Whether it's territorial reasons we go, gustatorial, medicinal, intellectual, theatrical, romantic, or even bromantic. Somewhere warming, refreshing, calming, exciting. To watch sports, watch girls, watch boys, watch the bartender, or just watch the world go by. These are all things worth celebrating because they're all celebrations of human life. So the final drink that you're getting is kind of an inverted martini. We've gone heavy on the vermouth, slightly lighter on the vodka, and we've mixed it with a raspberry and mustard seed syrup. That was cooked sous vide, 55 degrees, for about 4 hours. And what it's done is it's extracted some of the juice out of the raspberry. So there's a clear raspberry note running through, but also some of the flavor from the mustard seed. Now, mustard is quite sulfurous. And so this isn't champagne, it's not sparkling wine, but we wanted to kind of get some of that fermentation character through and some of that sulfur. So you'll get that along with slight heat from the mustard as well. That has just been finished with a touch of acid phosphate as well, so a mixture of acids and salts, just to kind of dry up the finish and give it some sort of crisp linger. So enjoy.
So, thank you for the drinks and for the information. To summarise all of what we've shared together, drinking really is a communicative act. It's a performance of identity, but one which also communicates so much more. It functions as an almost silent language, a language that on many occasions needs neither words nor expressions. Even the solitary drinker at the bar speaks wonders, in part because drinking is a cultural fact on which thousands of years, millions of gestures have accumulated. And at other times, however, the drink is the elixir of verbiage, the privately understood and publicly sanctioned approval to talk a lot and to talk loudly. The clientele is no longer just men, much less the white men of early America. All people of all types are welcome in all bars, but custom and comfort, to say nothing of price and atmosphere, still nudges us to sort ourselves into groups of sorts ourselves into groups of people who harmonise and socialise in the right way, just the right bar. Thanks for that shot, Tristan. Sorry, it's a tasting here. We come to a bar to bond, and when we find a place that we feel at home, we think of it with a warmth that we associate with family. Drinking is used to celebrate births, deaths, marriages, and so many more aspects of everyday life, identity, and culture. I just lost my cursor, so I'm going to blame the shot again. I'm Tristan in general. There's a cursor out there somewhere. There you go. So drinking is used to celebrate births, deaths, identity and culture. Where we go to drink and who we go to drink with is a reflection of our wider community, as well as the roles alcohol and drink and how they relate to our histories. So we're not only what we drink, but we are also what we drank. And drinking memories become another thread that links us to our past, as well as help us understand communities that are distinct from our own. In this way, drinking is the commonality of the human experience, which brings us closer when our natural instinct is actually to pull away. Perhaps it's for this reason that we've always drank, and we will continue to express our identities through drinking, beyond today's modern bar and into the future bar. What that will look like and what we'll be drinking is up for debate. However, for now, I'd like to encourage us all to celebrate drinking to celebrate cocktails and what the modern bar means to us all by joining together to sing, and I mean sing, the ultimate bar anthem. I hope you're ready. Stand up, please, boys. Come on.
This is everyone, by the way. It's not just us. We know what to get, just everything down. Taking a break from all your worries, sure could help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away?
You know the words, sing along. Come on, you don't need them up on the screen. Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and you're always glad you came. You wanna be there, people are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Catch up. You wanna go where people are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. This is the instrumental part now, which I love. So I just want to say thank you to our two wonderful co-presenters by saying cheers. And also, while we have this wonderful bit of instrumental, to just plug their books while we can. So please buy Tristan's new book on the left, The Baristas Guide to Coffee, and The Narcissist Next Door by the wonderful Kluger. And another great shout out to our cats in the back there. Absolutely on time. I mean, it couldn't have been nicer. Also to let you know that of course this seminar was being recorded. It's being recorded, and if you follow me at Belvedere Claire on Twitter, I will let you know when it's available for download. So, anybody got any questions? No, standing silence for that sing-along. I mean, why wouldn't you be?
Maybe the question is, why did we just have to sing with this?
Question, because it was a communicative act, and it's like, this is our shared community. And as I told you earlier, when you share experiences, you feel a sense of bonding and kinship. Oh, we love you. Any feedback, any thoughts, any questions? Did you have a good time? Good. I mean, a sing-along will always do that, right? This was a massively researched topic. This is a huge topic. Someone needs to write a book about it. Tristan will probably write a book about it. Jeff will do it, if not. But just for those of you that want to follow up on some of our sources, we quoted a lot of information. There's an information-rich seminar. These are some of the sources that we used. One of the best books on this topic is Drinking Cultures by Thomas Wilson. If anybody wants to get more acquainted with this subject, I definitely recommend that. It's available on Amazon. But essentially, you know, this is a huge, vast, all-encompassing, sprawling topic, and one that's really not well investigated, mainly, as I said, because at the beginning, a lot to do with alcohol consumption is considered to be a negative. And we know that we're at the Ultimate Cocktail Festival, where this is a positive space, and so we wanted to just bring that sort of positivity to the topic of drinking cultures.